I'm back with another video. I don't know if, hopefully everyone can hear. I'm on the highway, and so hopefully you can hear this. So I'm kind of making another, like, Jungian video about personality theory in general. I've been, dancing around in, personality theory for a while, and the most recent system, as you guys know, that I've been into is socionics for a while. But now I'm at a point where I still use socionics primarily, but I kind of just zero in on different parts of different systems and explain how I see those descriptions of types of personalities, of types of information, whatever the case is, and how it relates to reality and how you can see evidence of that. And so I'm not as, with that said, I'm not as much of a stickler about what system one chooses to use. Like, that's kind of a waste of time at the end of the day. But so I wanted to talk about introverted feeling and kind of the different systems' way of describing what that is, and from a MBTI, classical Jungian defining, FI deals with your own personal sentiments and value-based judgments, and you kind of have like a hierarchy of priorities that a hierarchy of things that you value, and that you have different levels of prioritizing those things. And that is a pretty true feature of every FI person I've ever encountered, that there is a sense of evaluating whether or not a person or a relationship or a friendship or a goal or a career is meaningful and valuable to them. Like, they're like, and if it's not worth it, it's not worth the investment. And that's kind of how just gamma types in general, right? I think socionics does a good job describing what gamma types are actually after, and they're looking at things that are worth investing in over long periods of time, and things that are profitable, that will that are worth capturing and acquiring and then leveraging for some end purpose. And so if that thing doesn't leverage any long-term benefit, then a gamma type won't really see the value in that thing they're pursuing. And it's really interesting how gamma types would be different from alpha types, would be different from betas, so on and so forth. And I find that it's just a very fascinating thing. And you have different systems that will, like, for example, socionics is like the definition of introverted ethics. FI is dealing about the ethics of relations. It's the information element that's responsible for evaluating psychological nearness or distance with people in general. So, you meet someone for the first time, and you're kind of evaluating whether or not it's the kind of person that you'd like to get closer with or not, or whatever the case is, right? Or someone you're interested in romantically, that you're aware of the space between you and them and what's necessary to either widen that gap and basically push them away, and repulse them and reject them, right? Or to attract them and to kind of create that closeness. And that closeness that FI is aware of obviously doesn't have to be intimate closeness, but also familial closeness and closeness with your friends, so on and so forth. Like, how do I close the gap? Do I say certain things in order to get this person to open up and demonstrate that from that I'm trustworthy, and so that build the trust that's built from that causes nearness, right? Potentially. Or if they don't like someone, how to just draw lines in the sand clearly and cleanly, and to break off that relationship, or to break off that friendship, or to break off whatever, right? And there's more complexity, because if you combine introverted ethics with a function responsible for conflict and challenging and acquiring and possessing a thing, and has behavioral themes of combat, of competition, of confrontation, willpower, all of those things, then you combine those two things together, and then obviously you get someone that would look far more willful than a person that doesn't have extroverted sensation. And this obviously from a socionic sense. If you want to use a different system, you could say, if a person is an FI lead but has low extroverted judgment, low TE, like they're not really capable of creating external order and creating, guidelines for people to follow, and then yes, that person is going to have silent judgments about you, right? They're not going to explicitly share those, because they're not trying to directly affect the environment. Like, FI is not trying to do that. FI is trying to affect relations and the relationships that they're in, of which gamma types, interestingly, and it's interesting when you have different, again, like FI pairings with whether it's NE or SE or whatever the case is, right? But hopefully, I hope people can hear me. This area kind of gets weird every time I've driven over here. It just kind of pops out, but FI is concerned about its people. Like, if you're in a group, FI people don't really care about the vibe. Like, they're not trying to actively engage with the energy within the environment. It's not that they can't do that, but they're not trying to affect the environment that way energetically. They're not necessarily trying to raise people's moods, or to cause feelings of anger, or whatever the case is, like exciting people and getting people worked up. Like, they're not trying to do that. And this is all, again, and these are generalities, but I think they're pretty fair for the most part. The most that an FI person really engages with the group, and when I say engaging with the group, I mean in a way that's not about the energy. They're not trying to make people laugh per se, right? They're not trying to liven the mood. If they're in a group that their people that they care about are in that group, and they could be genuinely interested in that group, whatever, then they want to be doing some kind of productive activity towards the end of whatever that group's goal is to pursue. So I'm trying to think of a practical example. Like if there was a ESI, for example, or a FISE in a book club, because they're gamma types, first of all, they're serious. Second of all, they don't want to just have pointless banter, right? Gamma types generally don't appreciate that. They want to stick to the task. What are we here for that makes this time meaningful? That makes this time worth my time, right? That's a gamma's way of thinking. If I'm coming to this book club, we had better be reading the book. One, we better be talking about the book. That's the way that they're thinking about the group hangout. Now, if you take an alpha type, that's going to be an issue, because alpha types, they want to diverge away from the main purpose of the meeting. The whole point of it would be to talk about the book that they're talking about. Whereas obviously you could imagine them talking about different books that relate to the book that they're reading, or the ideas presented within the book that they are reading, and kind of just divert away from the main point. The point is to talk about the book and not talk about all these other different books they've read that relate to this. And so it would be pretty difficult, or just, alpha types wanting to just exist in the mood and enjoy the vibes, and there doesn't have to be a clear direction within the book, the whole thing, piece by piece by piece. They would get really piece by piece. They would get really irritated, especially in ESI would get irritated, because to them it feels meaningless. It's like, why are we here if we're not talking about the book? Which is very commonsensical. It's like, we came to talk about Cat in the Hat, and now we're talking about geopolitics or whatever. You're like, how does that relate to Cat in the Hat? And any polar can't see the points that led to the any person diverging from the main point. They don't see why it's relevant. They don't know where they got that from. They're like, how did you get from here to there? I don't know the line. I can't see the line to follow the initial thought to the outlier kind of thought that's seemingly unrelated, because they value NI. They're trying to see the field between ideas and the point between two lines, or the line between 2 points, rather. And so yeah, FI is a very, like, a lot of times it's not really talked about. Like, obviously with socionics, you don't get into like the personal sentiments as being a socionics way of defining FI. Obviously that's more of an MBTI and classical Jungian way of describing FI. But at the end of the day, like, you can clearly see that in people. There's probably a way logically that you could deduce that socionics' definition can still account for that manifestation of FI. But it's just a very interesting thing to note. So, yeah, that's all I have. Peace.